things to do at the moment, but
That's good.
okay, so we are going to begin. Let's just hope that this starts from the beginning. Yeah. Okay, so like I said, there is spoilers in here, but I think what's really wonderful to think about is there's some amazing Israeli TV series that have come out, but the fascination by Israelis with the ultra-Orthodox life, with the modern Orthodox life, and we know Shtisel and Strugim, even though they're both religious, are worlds apart, and I'll show it to you on a map in a minute, actually, where they're based, but it's like a completely different planet almost that they come from, even though they're both dealing with religious life. But the fact that the secular Israeli TV is so fascinated by this, and even more than that is what we've seen, which is amazing. When we first did like the Shtisel program, we started watching it in shul. It wasn't available on mainstream TV. Like I just heard about it through another Rebbetzen, and we'd watched it, and people who knew about it from Israeli friends. But now it's become on Netflix, and you know, Strugim is on Prime, as I said, and it's just exploded. It's unbelievable, the fascination, really, like the worldwide fascination. So when I made this slide, I shared this. These are some Facebook groups. So this one is the Shtisel group, which I'm part of actually, and there's new posts every day. Like Estelle, I think you're on it as well.
Yeah,
I'm not
yeah,
sure. Sarah, you also?
Yeah,
I'm on it too.
Oh, you all are. Everyone is. See, it's amazing. I just checked today because this is from a bit over a year ago. It's now over 27,000 members, and I think 1.6 thousand joined this week, which makes sense because of season 3. But it's just like beggars belief. And you know, when you look at the places people come from, and most people, plenty of people aren't Jewish and asking all questions, I think it's really wonderful, positive publicity about the Jewish people, even though for us, like, we're not Haredi, you know, we're not like the way that they are. It's just we're not living in Geula, but actually it's lovely that people have fallen in love with this country, with this family, and with these characters. I think what's incredible as well, as we all know, is that they're secular Israeli characters, and they've learnt the part and they play it so well. It's just wonderful when you watch the nuances and the Yiddishisms, and you know, you're talking about Israeli people who don't know Yiddish, and they, as we all know, in Israel it's quite polarized. Often the secular and the religious don't mix together at all, so it's not like they know a lot about each other, but they've obviously really looked into it and studied the characters well. And I think the producers come from more the Haredi world as well, which is really interesting. So that's the Shtisel group. The Srugim group I'm not actually a member of, but that also, I haven't looked up the latest numbers, but that's loads of people on there as well. Okay, so this is what I wanted to show you, was in terms of understanding where the different communities are, what we're talking about. So over here you've got Mamilla and the old city, right? Over here's we've got Shari Chesed. I'm just wondering if I can hide this. 1 second. Yeah. Over here is Geula. Now Geula, that's where Shtisel takes place. It's, I think, even 55 minutes, I think, is even pushing it, but I think it's even less than that. But it's just, you walk through kind of town and Rechavia, and then you get to Katamon. And Katamon is where Srugim takes place. So it's right, they're like almost neighboring, then like almost neighborhood. This is Jaffa Gate you have over here, and you've got Ben Yehuda would be probably somewhere over here, I think. And that's Rehov Jaffa. But it's really, really close to each other. You're talking about two communities that are so near each other, and the Katamon one, as we know from Srugim, is like the young, single, modern Orthodox, religious Zionist kind of community. Srugim comes from Sruga, which is like the knitted couple, the Kippah Sruga, and Shtisel is happening here in the heart of Geula, and Geula is right next to town, so it's not as if they do live in their own kind of world. And one of the clips I'm going to share, if you remember, was when Gitti went to Rehov Jaffa. She went into town and she went shopping there, and how, even though it was a neighboring you know, it's like walking from here, not even to Stanmore. It's closer than that, but it's like a completely different world apart. So that's just to see it on the map. Okay, so now I'm going to share some of my favorite clips and some of like the lessons that I think that we can learn from Stockholm. There's so many. I literally could have chosen 700, but and that's just from like series 1 and 2. Series 3 has so much to talk about, but we'll wait till everyone's caught up with that as well. But do you think it's really ironic, the fact that there's a TV series about Haredim, because TV is a big no-no in Gola. What's interesting is, though, I think a lot of Haredi people have now seen Shtisel, and people who live without TVs, obviously, you know, smartphones and things aren't quite as strict as they used to be. So these things are kind of coming out there. You know, again, from the Facebook group, I've seen people saying that they've gone to the restaurant, or the actors and actresses have gone to the restaurant, and the people there kind of know who they are. So obviously it's a known thing. It's not quite as sheltered as Geula and Mea She'arim used to be. It used to be really like they wouldn't know anything about the outside world. I think they know a little bit more now. But I just love this wonderfully ironic scene where you've got our wonderful Baba Malka, right, the amazing grandmother, watching this the American family. And if you remember at a later point, she's praying for all the characters in this soap opera because she got so involved in their lives, and what her grandson thinks about the fact that she's watching TV, and how, you know, he can't cope with how his grandma, he quotes a line which I don't think I included here. At another point he says, my grandmother, who all she would do is read her Tsena Ura'ena, it's called. And Tsena Ura'ena was like when the first Beis Yaakov came about, when Sarah Shnira, that was what the Jewish girls were allowed to read. It's not even a Chumash. It was like Chumash translated into Yiddish, because girls weren't allowed to learn anything written down inside. But this was like the studying book. So his grandmother, who would like sit there praying all day, and suddenly she's watching these TV shows and, you know, what's going on TV, so you can imagine the way they felt about it. So I'll show you this clip.
שלום בובה, אני מגיע עכשיו מהר המנוחס. תראה מה זה שם באמריקה. לא כמו כאן, אצל החופשים שמגדלים ילד ושני כלבים. אתה רואה? אצלם משפחה, 5 ילדים. ריץ', טורן, ביל, סמנטה, הבלונדינקי והכלב שלהם, אז זה שיפולה. כן, יופי. אז מה את אומרת, אולי אני אזמין לנו טקסי וניסע ביחד לסעודה? לא, צבי אריאל, אני אשאר כאן. זה בסדר. אני אהיה איתכם בלב שלי. אני כבר לא מה שהייתי. כבר לא כל כך פשוט לקום. גם אין לכם מעלית. אני ראיתי בלובי שיש הרצאה של הרב נויגר זה מעניין אותך? רב נויגר שר, זה מהרדיו. זה משהו. נותנים כאן דברים מאוד מעניינים. אז בואי נלך. אני אלווה אותך. תכף מתחיל. בסדר. Kusin tochs. Kom jaren, als we zullen gaan komen nemen. Er toch het al met kochen? Nee, ik heb het niet gehoord. That's the kind of thing our company could do. Very good. They want to learn.
just a sec. So just go back for a second. I just love that clip. I love that, you know, Tzvi Aryeh obviously can't cope with his grandmother's choices in life, but he's got this balance between respecting his grandmother and, you know, honoring your mother and your father and that side of thing. And at the same time, he has to deal with what he feels is correct. And I think one of the issues that come up again and again and again, actually, is the idea of honesty and the idea of how we treat different people. Like if is it okay what he did, you know? And I think the moral questions, they come up so many times of, you know, was his behavior okay or not? I think that's really interesting. Okay, so this, I didn't manage to stop it in time, so I'm just going back for a second. Sorry. So like, as you see, he breaks the TV because he doesn't want his grandmother to be watching. Okay, so the next idea we have from Ethics of Our Fathers is the idea of not judging your friends until that you reach their place. I think this is a really strong message throughout, actually, both series. But as we said, this idea of these are normal people with life challenges, just like you and me, and they have to really figure out how to navigate the different parts of their lives. So over here, this is one of the issues that comes up again and again in Shtisel, as we know, the dynamics between Shulam and his children, and this idea of what do I do if my children wants to be different, if my child wants to be different from me, and I think specifically in religiosity, that's a big question, and that actually comes up in Srugim more. It does in Shtisel a little bit, but it's interesting that by and large, the characters are all religious and pretty much stay within being religious. Obviously, Lipa is a question when he has his interesting journey and dynamics over there. But it's more than that. It's the idea of how do you cope when your child wants to choose something different from you? And we've had these sort of discussions with so many people in the community. You know, I'm thinking even everyone who's on now, that's a very real thing that we've all had to live with, haven't we? When your child chooses to be more religious than you, when your child chooses to be less engaged than you, when your child chooses a career that's not really your lifestyle, to live in a different country, to live in a different way, to yes, come for Seder, not come for Seder, all these kind of questions. It's the same question as Shulam and Akiva in terms of his artwork and appreciating who his child is. And in theory, we can all look at Shulam and judge him and say, you know, why doesn't he just accept his son for who he is? But when it comes to us and our children, we know that actually it's not so straightforward. The roof, when they sing the "Do You Love Me," right? It's like, we've been for 25 years, you know, I've done everything for you, and now you ask me, do I love you? But actually, I love this idea that actually words are wonderful, and of course it's wonderful to tell your loved ones how much you love them, but actually actions speak so much more, and it's the tiny small acts of love that means so much. So, you know, taking out the butter in the morning, that has such a powerful effect. Okay. Oh,
Jacqueline, it's interesting you say that, because as you know, I've just watched the
that's what I was saying,
the reunion, and they finished off with that. There's a new Yiddish version of Fiddler, and they showed two of the actors, the one who's playing Tevye and the other one who's playing Golda, actually singing it in Yiddish to each other, and they went through the word. That's how the program ended, with "Do You Love Me?"
Oh, amazing. But I think it's such a good point, though. It's like, you know what, it is. I think it's wonderful. I think we should all tell the people we love every single day that we love them. I do. But at the same time, it's like that song has so much meaning, doesn't it, Kathy? It's like, well, you know, I did everything for you because I loved you. Everything is an expression of my love. It's not just saying I love you. Thank you. I've skipped a bit, so I'm just going to...
מה הילדים קנו להם? דואר באמת. הפרופסורים הכי טובים. אני גר פה בירושלים, האמת לא ככה.
Okay, so now we're going to look at the part when Gitti goes to work for a secular family. And again, I think that this message is something that's so important for us, that we view different people and how we view different people and how we judge different people. You know, we through lots of different things that we've done in life, I've got to meet some really interesting people. At one point when we were living in Jerusalem, we lived in Ramat Eshkol, and I remember waiting at the bus stop with our kids, and I looked like every other religious person waiting at the bus stop, and the place we were waiting at was like a high street and like a motorway almost, actually, and there were some kids that came out of a school. And I remembered like the way that they looked at me, you know, I had lots of little children, like the typical scene with all the kids trying to get on the bus, and there was 3 of them at the time. But I remember like looking at them, looking at me and thinking, like, why are you judging me? Like, I could tell that they were really looking at me as like in a really unimpressed kind of way. I'm like, I'm a really nice person, you know, come to my house for Shabbos, that kind of, you know, that kind of feeling. But I think we all do it. And I think it's not fair to say that we don't. We all view people who are different to us. I think this was a really telling line, actually, that Gitti says in a second. So I'm going to just play this bit. In Israel, actually, Dosit is quite it's considered like a derogatory kind of like slang. But that is, you know, yeah, I'm religious. Like, okay, that's who I am. That line also, like, it's just so golden. It's like so opposite to like what we might come across as like in the kiruv kind of world, or in the trying to get more people on board kind of world. And this was like, no, I say blessings, you don't. Like, I'm religious, you're not. There's a very clear, and we know this about Israel, there's a very, very clear divide between religious people and secular people. I think to me was just also a wonderful way that you see the secular mother running off to work and having to hire someone to look after her children, and poor Gitti having to leave her kids with her daughter, who, you know, really she should have been there with her family, but she's just trying this impossible life-work balance. It doesn't matter who you are and where you live, when you're, you know, when you're a young mother, it is just impossible to try and balance everything. And we're all trying to juggle that in whether you're Jewish, whether you're not, whether you're religious, whether you're not, it's a struggle for everyone. And I thought that was quite a powerful message over there. Okay. So the next part that I wanted to share is the mental health idea, and I thought that the program dealt with mental health issues and the issues with not dealing with mental health in such a very strong, powerful way, and the idea of not talking about things and, you know, just pretending it doesn't exist, and how that can be so damaging. I thought that was a really powerful and strong part of the program, and that's why I've got quite a long clip here actually to share. But again, I thought it was really powerful.
כולם שמחים שסיימת לעבוד וחזרת אלינו. כן. גיטי, אני חייב לבקש ממך סליחה על כל הכל בסדר, ליפה. בוא ניכנס.
I think here you really see, like, Gitti thinks she's doing him a favor, and herself, like, let's not talk about it, right? Let's just pretend everything's fine. Let's just move on. And you can see how much he's struggling with that. But actually, we know she's also really struggling with that idea. She's trying to be this righteous person. Also, she's afraid probably of confrontation. And it's just this, like, let's continue. Let's pretend everything's normal. We don't want to talk about it, that idea. And here again, he's going to ask her to discuss it.
אני לא יכול ככה, גיטי. מה? שאנחנו לא מדברים על מה שהיה.
אני עייפה לי פה, וגם אתה עייף מאוד.
אבל אי אפשר להתנהג כאילו לא קרה כלום.
אבל באמת לא קרה כלום, אתה מבין? לא קרה כלום. לילה טוב לי פה.
If you remember, this was the advice she was given as well, which is, you know, I think that is probably like the more old-fashioned way of approaching things. You know, pretend nothing happened, therefore nothing happens, and it's not doing any of them any favors. It's interesting from like a psychological perspective to think about how the dynamics are playing out over here in terms of avoiding confrontation, avoiding talking about difficult things. You can see he's desperate to discuss it with her, and we know that happens quite a few times throughout the series, that he really needs to talk to her about it, and she doesn't want to talk about it. I'm turning off the volume here because for some reason when I was downloading this clip, it's got all the background noise as well, and it started replaying at the same time as well. But you've got the subtitles, so hopefully that will be fine as well. But if you remember at this point, Lipa's back already, but at this point, Gitti's going into a shop. And this is where you see it's like a pressure cooker when you don't deal with the mental health issues or the things that are bothering you, and you think it's fine, I won't talk about it. And we know this, right? We all do this, but I won't talk about it and it'll be fine. And then suddenly it's like a pressure cooker and it explodes. And that's what happens to Gitti over here. Sorry that I don't have the sound. It's just more confusing if I keep it on. And she just goes mad. This woman pushed in front of her, but it's suddenly like her outlet of how to express herself is through violence, which is not like her at all, but she just bottled it up for so long that she exploded. And what's interesting we'll see now is Lipa has the same thing, that she won't discuss it with him. He has no one to talk to, and he ends up talking to Rachami, his little daughter. We're going to see that scene now as well. Poor Gitti. This was a really powerful scene as well, if you remember. Remember, she wanted to post these all up on the walls to say what an evil person he was. It's interesting, this whole secrecy about it. Obviously the kids know, which is in every situation, the children always know, right? We think we can hide it from ourselves or our spouse, but the kids always know what's really going on. And then I thought it was just really powerful when he sits down and he has a heart-to-heart with his young daughter. That bit just made me, that just melted my heart when he says to his daughter, "Thank you for listening." I really needed that. And I have to say, actually, I think Lipa's one of my favorite characters. I think everyone probably has their favorite, but I think he's got such a complex story, and he's really just wants to be a good guy. And I'm not saying, obviously he made some big mistakes, but you can see he genuinely loves his family, and he's struggling. You can really see that about him. So this brings us now to the end of, I believe, the end of the clips from Shtisel. I'm just checking. Yeah, and we're going to now go on our walk towards Katamon, like we said, 55 minutes down the road. But just before I go on to the Katamon clips and the Srugim clips, does anyone want to comment on some of the points I brought out? Like I said, there's so much that we could spend months discussing every episode and all the different details and all the different lessons from it. But those were just some of the ideas that I wanted to bring out. What's interesting, actually, if we compare it to what we're going to look at now, it's not so much about understanding why you do certain things or questioning why you do certain things. It's just all accepted. Like, there's no debate or discussion about Shabbos or about kashrut or about anything really. This is just the way that they do things, or modesty even. It's not really that's not what the program's about. Whereas in Srugim, there are lots of different questions like that. But I think that there's a lot of humanity that's discussed and moral questions and that side of things, more than actually the religious lifestyle. That's just a given in Shtisel. So any comments from you about Shtisel before we move on? Like we said, no spoilers of season 3 yet, but anything that anyone wants to share?
I just wanted to make an observation that in all of the clips you've shown, and actually in the whole series, my admiration is for the women. They are so strong, and I don't know if they're real or lifelike, but they seem to have depth, and they seem to be having to care for the men, not just care as a wife or a mother or anything like that, but even more than that, because the men appear to me to be a bit at a loss, a bit weak, a bit not quite knowing what's what or how to deal with things. And I just want to make that observation.
It's interesting. It's interesting also, actually, in terms of in the society where very often the man was sitting and learning or teaching. That's kind of like pretty much the two options of what they're doing. The women will often be the main breadwinner. In Lakewood, it's definitely like that in America, because the women get some really high-powered kind of jobs to be able to support their husbands in learning. But in Israel as well, our next door neighbor, we're very, very close to the family. She's a computer programmer, and he is the head of his program where he's like teaches and runs it, but at the end of the day he's not going to make that sort of money from a yeshiva lifestyle. And it is interesting, and it's interesting also in terms of, you know, the dynamics and the respect for each other as well. It's just a very, very interesting dynamic. But I think you're right, and I think, Joy, in season 3 you really see the strength of the women developing even more. I wonder sometimes if the reason that it's kind of so obvious to us is because we've kind of got a bit of a prejudice that the women are treated badly or second class in that sort of society, but actually they're really not. And I think that's wonderful that this series shows us that they're very strong-minded, you know, very, there's actually I was doing I was practicing with Yehuda his learning from school on Shabbat, and in the Mishnah he came across, it said Ishto zu beso, the woman is the house. That's the way that it describes the woman. Now, in like politically correct, you know, 2021, none of us would say like, how dare, in feminism, right? How dare you call the...
To get out of it.
Evelyn, do you want to mute yourself?
Bottom right hand. No, I'm fine.
Okay,
fine. My husband was talking to me, sorry.
No problem, no problem. So what I was saying is, it's not like the, you know, the like the feminists would hate that kind of way of speaking, but it's not a negative thing. It's the idea of the power behind the home, and we know the Jewish home is the future of Judaism, and it's where all Judaism happens, is from the home. Shul is just an extra bit where it's important, of course, in the community, but actually the fact that the woman is called the home is a real compliment. And we see that in this series, you're right, that the strength of these women, that they keep their families together. I mean, Gitti's an amazing example. What she kept her family together in the most incredible way, and continues to do, even when Lipa comes back, actually. But I think you're right, all the women really do. And actually, we can even reflect what a lost soul Shulam is, because he doesn't have a woman to take care of him and to guide him and to remind him to be kind to his kids and all those kind of things. So that's really interesting. Any other comments? Otherwise, we're going to move on to Srugim.
Can I just say, Jacqueline,
Yeah,
something that struck me is that the men don't have a chance to mature. And I mean, Lipa says it there himself, that he was married at 19 and suddenly he had all this responsibility. But I think generally in life, they don't have a chance to mature because the responsibility is taken away from them. The wives take it away because they're the breadwinners and they're doing everything. And you see it all the time. And it does worry me a bit that that may still be happening. That's an observation, and it's something I've seen as well, that they get married so young that they have no time to sort their lives out, to work out what they are as people, the men especially.
It's really interesting. Thank you, Kathy. It's an interesting one. Yeah, it's a different society, and it depends what strand of the society as well. You know, in Gola, like you said, he was 19. There's some places where, you know, 22 is considered young. There's some places where 25 is considered young. There's some places where 30 is considered, you know, the regular time to get married. And you're right, it is about finding yourself, also about finding yourselves together. But I think the idea of respecting, it doesn't matter who's the breadwinner. You see that in a lot of families, actually, where different people earn different amounts, and it's always a bit of a challenge if the woman's earning more than the man, because, you know, that is the society that we're part of, and you know, completely different worlds to this. But I always like to think about with Ruth Bader Ginsburg and her husband, and he started off as a lawyer, and then he took a bit of a back seat to allow her to advance her career. And, you know, the strength in who he was, but society will kind of say, wow, look how amazing he is. Whereas when a woman does that, it's not quite viewed in the same way. So I think these are all very real issues, Kathy. Thank you for raising that. Like I said, we're going to take our walk now to Katamon, our virtual walk. We wish we could be in Israel. Maybe one time we'll do that. We'll do an Israel trip, Jissel, Srugim. I don't know where Fowler's based, actually. I haven't seen that one, but we could do a trip based around all the TV shows. But now we're going to go on to onto Strugim. So, like I said, the interesting thing about Strugim as opposed to Shtisel is in Strugim you have the discussion of things not being black and white. So there is discussion about Shabbat, there is discussion about kashrut, there is discussion about Tarat HaMishpacha, the Nida laws, which you wouldn't have in Shtisel, because there it's just taken for granted. Everybody does it. There's no discussion over there. So here we're going to talk about Shabbat. And let me take off the volume. I think these clips are fine there. Sorry, so I'm just going to fill in because Evelyn, I know you said you haven't seen it. Just to give you a clue, this girl is actually the daughter of a rabbi, and she's rebelling. She's met a secular man. She was already rebelling anyway. She's kind of leaving the religious life, or she's deciding whether she should or shouldn't. So this is going to be when Shabbat's coming in, and she's going through a lot of life challenges and not sure who she is and what she stands for. Just to give you a bit of context.
Okay, thank you.
So in Israel, you know, there's a siren when it's Shabbat.
זה נראה לי מאוחר מדי להדליק. אז אני לא אדליק.
I'm going to skip just because we're going to run out of time.
כולם מחכים רק לך.
כי הוא יום תחילה למקראי קודש, זכר ליציאת מצרים, כי אנו בחרת ואותנו קידשת מכל העמים, ושבת קודשך בעבר ורצון לך.
I always say that Strugim is like friends, like that kind of idea, like they're all single, all trying to get married, that kind of dynamic. And they come and hang out together.
יכולנו לאכול מזמן, אני מת מחרב.
בסדר, גם לא די חיכינו. אז מה קרה? הוא אמר שהוא יבוא. והוא לא חבר שלי, הוא מורה שלי.
ככה קוראים לזה?
שיט! אני לא מאמינה, את לא חיפית אור במקרר.
So this is a big job in our house to remember to turn off
נו באמת, מה כבר ביקשתי ממך? סטאט, שכחתי, קורה. מה אני אעשה עכשיו? לא יכולה לפתוח ולסגור את הדלת של המקרר. בסדר, נו. מה בסדר? יפעת, אפשר להסתדר, זה לא כזה נורא. זה כן נורא. אני עכשיו צריכה להוציא גם את האוכל של מחר, וגם את הקוגל, והוא בטח יתקלקל. בסדר, נו, די עם הדרמה. לילה אחד בדירה קפואה הזאת לא יקרה שום דבר לקוגל. אם את כל כך לחוצה, אפשר להעביר את זה לדירה של הבנים. אני לא רוצה לשים את זה בדירה של הבנים. הנה. עכשיו הכל בסדר. מה את חושבת שאת עושה? מה? מסדרת לך את המקרר, שתוכלי להוציא את הקוגל שלך להתחתן.
מה, יפעת, עשית קוגל? אני מת על קוגל.
אז עכשיו את גם מחללת שבת בבית הזה? תראי מה את עושה בגללו. מה אני עושה? תראי מה את עשית. טורפת. פיקה קידושים. תגלי את כולנו מהסיפור הזה כבר ותגידי לו. זה בית שומר שבת!
יפעת, די, מה קרה?
מה יפעת? מה יפעת? אני לא מוכנה שיחללו שבת בבית הזה, זה בית שלי. יש פה כללים ברורים, ואם זה לא מתאים לך... ואם זה לא מתאים לי, אז מה, תגרשי אותי? כן, את תחפשי דירה שמתאימה לך. כן, אני באמת אחפש. כבר ביום ראשון. לא, כבר עכשיו.
נו, מה?
So, you know, you can see that there's a lot of heightened emotions obviously around it, but as I said, it's much less black and white. You know, it's just not, there'll be someone who comes to the Shabbat table and she's kind of deciding, does she like candles, doesn't she? And she's going through a life crisis over here. And what's nice to see over the series is that, you know, Yifat does become more understanding of her. And again, just relating this to all of our lives, right? We all have things that we expect of people and we expect, you know, a certain way of behavior, but people make their own choices. And, you know, you can see that she's clearly struggling. This is another scene to do with kashrut that I wanted to share.
יואב, איך ידעת שאני דתייה?
שקוף.
So part of the reason that I love this is, I hope everyone can recognize, or you all know this already, but who this actor is from Shtisel. This is Lipa, but in Srogim, he plays a completely secular Israeli. So he has no idea at all about religious life, at all. And it's something that doesn't exist in England. Honestly, it doesn't. There is no, I don't think that there are Jewish people here who have as little knowledge of our religion as Israelis. I'll give you an example. When we were in Belmont, we had some Israeli soldiers come over, and part of their program, it was the British Friends of the Israeli War Disabled. I know many of you are familiar with it. And part of their program, we decided to do a night in the shul and playing games, and Elchanan was playing the guitar. And there were people there who were probably in their 40s, 50s, or 60s, had never been in a shul in their life. So I'm not talking about not going regularly. They had never stepped foot into a shul. And that's the interesting thing about Israelis, because they're very Jewish, but some of them really don't know a lot about Judaism at all. So this is going to be one of those examples. And he has no idea that she was religious or is struggling as a religious person. He doesn't know very much about her.
מה, אתה מבשל משהו?
כן, עוד כמה דקות זה יהיה מוכן.
So she's going to freak out because till now she only eats kosher. So she's...
מה בישלת?
הפתעה.
תגלה.
מה, לא חבל להרוס הפתעה?
תגלה, כי אני לא אוהבת הפתעות.
לא מגלה. ספגטי בולונז. אוהבת?
עם איזה בשר בישלת?
בשר בקר. אל תדאגי, קניתי אותו אצל בוריס במעדניה. מכירה אותו?
לא.
בוריס. מה חם לך?
כן, קצת חם לי.
אז תוריד את הסוודר.
לא, אני בסדר.
מה, אין לך שום דבר מתחת?
יש לי גופייה כזאת, אני לא יושבת אצלך בבית עם גופייה.
He thinks she's like, he doesn't understand what she's talking about. Like, why wouldn't you take off your top just because you're wearing a short sleeve shirt? But she's
סתם חם לי.
struggling with who she is and what she stands for.
וואלה. מה את אומרת?
נראה טוב. מה זה?
פרמיז'אנו רג'אנו.
לא רוצה.
מה, זה הגבינה הפרמזן הכי טובה שיש.
הבנתי, כן, פרמיז'אנו, לא רוצה.
מכירה את זה?
לא ממש, אבל...
בסדר, נו, נשים לך קצת, תתאמי.
You can imagine she's sitting in front of a bowl of spaghetti bolognese and he's grating cheese on top of it.
תיאבון. מה?
כלום?
לא רבע?
כן.
באה, מה קרה?
תיאבון. לא יודעת מה היה לי. מה היה לך? הלכתי לאברי, והיינו אמורים לצאת, ובמקום זה גאון החליט להכין לי ארוחת ערב איטלקית. אכלת? למה את חושבת שאני עם פלאפל? אז מה עשית? לא הייתי צריכה לעשות כלום. אוטומטית חטפתי כאב בטן.
ממה?
רק להסתכל על החלב והבשר. לא נעים.
נו, תספרי לו כבר שתציע, ממה
מה את מפחדת?
לא רוצה להיפרד ממנה.
למה להיפרד? למה שתיפרדו? מה, אין זוגות מעורבים?
כן, אבל הם עושים ויתורים. בשביל אברי לוותר על הרג'אנה שלו, זה חתיכת סיפור.
מה? לוותר על מה?
סתם, זה גבינה איטלקית כזאת שהחילונים אוהבים לאכול.
איך קוראים לה?
פרמיז'אנו רג'אנו.
רג'אנו.
רג'אנו, כן, אוכלים אותה בתפוסות דקות כאלה, איך שהבשר יוצא.
Obviously that just made me laugh. But I did recently buy in a shop, I wanted some Parmesan cheese for something, and on the packet it said Parmigiano Reggiano. I was like, oh look, and I didn't even know. Hanan doesn't watch any of this stuff, so I had no one to share the joke with, like, look, it's Parmigiano Reggiano. I was very excited about it. But isn't it interesting how you know, she's trying to decide on who she is and what she is, but even the thought of having meat and milk together makes her feel so sick, and it's something that she's really not comfortable with at all. I'm not going to be able to finish all of them. I want to show one more clip, if possible, if everyone's okay with that. Because the third part, there's the three main mitzvahs actually, is Shabbat, Kashrut, and Tarat HaMishpacha, which is the family purity laws. So I want to just, what's very interesting in Surugim is that they really do discuss about mikveh and how it affects things like that. And you know, part of when I was studying the Mayan program, and I'm involved with it now as well, a lot of it is to do with nida and with mikveh, and it's something that, you know, not a lot of people will learn about it maybe just before they get married, but it's, you know, really interesting how you see how modern Orthodox people are living with this in their lives and trying to struggle with it and figure out how to do it properly. So that's this. She's basically, she was just in a really bad mood, this person.
טוב, אני לוקחת כדורים שדוחים ביוץ, אז הם עושים אותי קצת עצבנית. הביוץ שלי פשוט מתחיל מוקדם מדי, הוא קורה בזמן של השבעה נקיים, אז הכדורים עוזרים לדחות אותו. עשיתי רפרט.
So this is really interesting because she's quite specific. She's explaining, obviously these are her two close friends, but there's something that's called halachic infertility, which is if somebody ovulates before they're able to go to the mikveh, because there's a certain amount of days, there's the 5 days and the 7 days, and that can be a real struggle, and there's all different sorts of opinions that you can discuss. But what's interesting is this is the character from before with the Parmigiano Reggiano, right? Hodaya. What's interesting with her is because she's grappling with understanding more than the others, with understanding, is it still relevant? Do we still respect the kind of the Jewish laws, or why can't we bend them? Why can't we change them? So they have a really interesting conversation there.
בזמנו על הכרות הלכתית, אל תגידי את זה. מה, הכרות הלכתית? סליחה. לא, פשוט משהו קטן בהקשר. את לא חייבת בכלל לקחת את הכדורים האלה. נכון, גם בשביל מה להביא ילדים, סתם עול. אבל גם מצוינת. תאבון. את לא צריכה לוותר על ילדים. די, הודיה, אנחנו התייעצנו כבר עם רופאה, ואחר כך עם רב, וזה הפתרון. אז אולי תתייעצו עם רב אחר. למה את לוחצת? ביקשו ממך משהו. אני חייבת לקחת את הכדורים האלה. לא נעים לך בחברתי, את לא חייבת. בסדר. אני רק אומרת שיש עוד דרכים להתמודד עם זה בלי לקחת כדורים שהופכים אותך לדניאלה וייס. כמו שיש הקלות מתי מתחילים לספור 7 נקיים. ואם את מתחילה לספור מוקדם יותר, אז את יכולה לטבול מוקדם יותר. יש נשים שיש להם 2 ימי מחזור. למה שיחכו 5 ימים? בתורה לא כתוב שמחזור זה 5 ימים. בסדר, אני אטבול בזמן ותודה על העצה. למה להתעקש על דבר כזה? כי אני מתחילה לספור מתי שאומרים לי, ולא מתי שבא לי. אולי לך כבר לא אכפת מכלום, אבל לי כן. אכפת לי ממך. צריך להקל על אנשים. טוב, גמרת העוגה.
איזה דוסית מקובעת. תהרוס לעצמה את החיים בשביל יום לפה, יום לשם.
טוב, זה שיצאת זה לא אומר שאת צריכה להתחיל לזלזל.
אני לא מזלזלת.
כן, כל משפט שני שלך זה לבטל את ההלכה כי היא מקשה על החיים. בסדר, הבנו.
מה עובר עלייך?
תעזבי את יפעת, שתלך בדרך שלה. באמת לוחצת.
So that's just showing, this is when I teach brides, this is part of what I teach them, is to understand where the 7 days that she was talking about comes from. That's over here. And she was saying that she has to take pills so that when she ovulates, it's closer to the window when she goes to the mikveh, which is just very interesting. But part of what makes it so relevant, like I said, to my life, is this is part of the training that I've been doing and I'm helping to run now, and with Sarah actually through the Office of the Chief Rabbi. And it's just so relevant to living a Jewish lifestyle. This is, even though this isn't spoken about, and it's interesting that it's brought up so much actually in this series, you have to have quite in-depth knowledge to understand what they're talking about. But it is interesting that this is brought up in Strugim, because it is a very big part of Orthodox life. But again, just like in Shtisel, they don't talk about keeping Shabbos and they don't talk about keeping kosher. They eat all the time and it's all kosher, right? And obviously they keep Shabbos, but it's not a topic of conversation. It's not a discussion. It's not a debate. But what's very interesting with what Hadaya's raised over here is this idea that sometimes when we look at the roles that the rabbis play, and are they deciding the laws, or how are they connecting to the laws? I'm on quite a few different Facebook groups that talk about Jewish women asking different questions and those kind of ideas. And very often it will come up, well, the rabbis made up, or the rabbis have decided, or why have the rabbis said this, and why are they telling women what to do, or why can't we change the rules? And those are the sort of questions we all ask, those kind of questions sometimes. But I think that that was a really interesting conversation over there when they say, you know what, this is the choices we're making, and you should respect that that's the choices we're making, even though it is making her life complicated, right, when she has to take hormone pills. And that's part of what the halachic authorities are dealing with the whole time, is how to help women in that sort of situation. So I just thought it was really interesting to see, again, in this series, how relevant and genuine in terms of what people are struggling with or what people are challenging. And again, the Strugim series is much more looking at nowadays the black and white, the grey area, this modern Orthodox world. It's much harder. It's much easier to be in a world that says everything's no, right? It's much easier. This world where, you know, you're allowed to date guys, you're allowed to hang out with guys, but there's guidelines and but there's understanding, or you're allowed to decide to go into the secular world, but how much? And this whole dynamic that you see, you know, is it easier to be trying to be in both worlds? And then we can take that and translate it into our own lives here in Bushy, right? And our families' lives. Is it easier that we are so much a part of the British society and British culture, or is it better if we're not as much? And, you know, then we're going, Kathy, back to how you started your evening with Fiddler on the Roof, right? This is the age-old question that Tefka was asking about, the importance of tradition, but at the same time, staying really true to, you know, staying true to our values, but being part of the society we're in. And I think sometimes it's much easier to just say, forget it, I'm not going to be part of the society. That's the easy way out. It doesn't mean it's the right way. So it's just really interesting, I thought, to see these kind of concepts. And again, like I said, I think that it's wonderful that Israeli TV is celebrating these parts of the society, especially because there's been so much friction between them. One of the interesting things as well that doesn't get raised in Shtisel or Strugim really, I think, is the idea of the army. And we know that that's always a big bone of contention. And I'm so happy that it wasn't part of the series, because otherwise it would all be about that, you know. And it comes up in very subtle ways when they talk about the Tzionim, right, the Zionists and how they're viewed. But to appreciate this very rich, both of these very rich communities that are so different from each other, and that we can learn so much from. As I said, I could go on for hours and hours and hours and share loads more different clips. I'm sure each of you could share, you know, what your favorite parts are, or what parts you connected to the most. But I just think we're really blessed that we live in a society that has all these wonderful things to be able to share. Like we said, we'll have to talk about Shtisel 3 once everyone's caught up with it. But any closing thoughts from anyone else here?
Only that I don't think I want to watch through again.
Why?
I don't know. Perhaps I'm too old.
Okay. It is very much like Friends,
just
I
that
have to say.
I didn't like Unorthodox. I couldn't cope with it.
Right.
It's not that it's my way or the highway, but some things go beyond me and I can't cope.
No
So
problem.
I think I'm too old for that, but this all I love.
Yeah. Good. Me too.
I have to say, I haven't watched Shugim yet. People keep telling me about it, but it's something I will have to. But I can't watch too many box sets in one go. We're just trying to get through.
You've got to do one at a time. I know.
I haven't even started looking at Shissel 3, and I'm on the Shissel Facebook group, and I'm not looking at anything.
You
now
mustn't, because they keep talking about it. Yeah.
So I'm not looking at it at all.
Yeah.
But there's just too many things to see to go on with and whatever else. But what I found interesting is how people who were watching Shtisel, who knew nothing about Judaism, were asking questions. And it's a way of educating people.
Yeah.
It's an indirect way of people who know nothing about Judaism, people who are Jewish, people who are not Jewish, learning about what it is to be Jewish. And I actually think that's very good. It's outreach in a different way.
Definitely. I think it's
Don't you think people are taking it a bit too literally? It is, after all, a film. It's a dramatization. And I've been going through all the Shtisel network and reading. It took me about half an hour tonight to read everybody's comments. And some of them are things that didn't even occur to me. Why do the men carry plastic bags? And things, and they go through all sorts of things that wouldn't just, people are really, I loved it, and I would like series 4, but I can't take it so literally. Maybe it's because my neighbours in Bournemouth were Haredim.
Yeah, I think, Evelyn, you're right. When you know that world, you don't even have the questions, because of course they have, like, they dress like that and they act like we all know that that's what they do. You know, it is interesting to see people who know absolutely nothing about it.
It makes me laugh, because they live in that world, and yet they've all got their mobile phones and they've all got their modern way. You know, they do all sorts of things that are so contrary. But I loved it. But the other one, Shugim, I don't think is for me.
I said, it's like a modern Orthodox version of Friends. So if you weren't a fan of Friends, I'd say
no, never. I haven't seen that, and I'm not square. Believe me, I'm very modern. With 5 grandchildren, I can't afford to be square. But there are certain things I can cope with, and certain things I don't. But Shtisel, I'm happy to discuss.
Yeah, lovely, lovely. Joy.
I was just thinking about how I watch them and how I view them, and the Shtisel I love it, but it's like watching something I would never be part of. It's a fantasy or something almost alien. Of course I understand everything, but that's just like a basic thing. When I was watching Shugim, I could identify, they're much younger than me, of course, but I could identify with some of the questions and the choices, and trying to come to terms with balancing modern and religious. I really identified with that part of it.
It's definitely closer to the world that we live in, definitely. You know, I agree with you. Stella, what were you going to say?
No, I was just agreeing with Sir again. Yeah, what you were saying. It's definitely closer to, with all the different types, with all their problems within what they believed in, what they didn't believe in, one going one way, the others going the other way. It was a very interesting series.
Lovely. Sarah, any thoughts from you?
I haven't watched it again, but I'm going to now.
Okay, babe. Oh, I didn't know you hadn't watched it. Oh, it's great. Yeah. Okay, great. So yeah, so it's lovely just to be able to spend some time talking about it. I think it would be great to have a chance to talk about the last Shtisel series, but I'm very aware that not everyone's seen it, and it's filled with so much that we'll wait to do that another time, maybe even in person, right? Maybe we'll have a a Shtisel 3 in person chat, which would be very exciting. But in the meantime, I think just the messages we can get from it is just to be compassionate to everyone, you know, irrespective of what they look like, where they come from, especially within the Jewish people. We're all one people, you know, we all have our pluses and minuses, and I think that, you know, we all know that during the pandemic not every section of our community came across so beautifully and wonderfully, and I think, you know, we all became quite judgmental, and maybe Shtisel 3 came out at just the right time to remind us, 1 second, you know, yes, maybe people didn't behave the way they should, but let's not judge each other, let's value each other, let's look at the positive in each other, because, you know, that's the secret of Am Yisrael Chai. So what a great way to go into the week of Yom Ha'atzmaut. Great programming coming up. On Wednesday night is the Yom HaZikaron ceremony. Thursday night there's a great Yom Ha'atzmaut party. There's loads going on all the time this week anyway. But just lovely to see you all, and see you again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye.
Jacqueline. Bye.
Good night. Nice to see you.
Bye.
Thank you.